Hello. I this is I don't know what this is going to be, but there's a lot going on in the world, and I have some thoughts about it. So I thought I would just do a little video. Maybe it'll be more than one. I don't know. About wedge issues, because it seems a lot of our politics now has really been uh, dominated by wedge issues rather than substantive issues. So this is problematic for democracy. This is problematic for progress. It's problematic for humanity and compassionate living. It's not aimed at solving problems. It's just aimed at dividing people. So, what's a wedge issue? Um, for purposes of this discussion, or I guess monologue, it's a divisive political issue that's generally used by someone to garner support, usually at the expense of another. So the ideas of attraction of one set of people and alienation of another set is important and key to um, understanding what a wedge issue is. All right, so the reason I'm here, I think most people know that mostly I have I have voluntarily surrendered the crown of whatever it is I am accused of being. I've been called chief and queen of turfdom or whatever, and I've never embraced that. I've never wanted it. I was very happy when other people who were far more intelligent and articulate than me came along and started talking about this issue because I have no interest generally in being like a focal point of anything. As an introvert, that actually was one of the most horrifying things about my participation in this debate. Of course, the debate, the debate I'm talking about. Anyway, so, but I'm still a person with opinions. And occasionally, I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I have opinions. I'm going to share some of them. Um, Most recently, I'm here because of a reporter who I politely asked to please correct some misinformation they spread about me because thinking reporters have an obligation to tell the truth. And they reacted very aggressively to my polite request that they just delete this misinformation about me that was intended to make me look more monstrous than I actually am. You might still think I'm monstrous once you know my opinions, but do it based on what I say, not what you are alleging I say. So that's why I'm here. So thank you, Don Ennis. I hope you recover from your concussion and whatever ailments plague you. All right, so wedge issues. The transgender issue is almost certainly one of the most important wedge issues that's dominating our politics in the United States. Um, and related to that, issues about homophobia and gay people. But transgender is really like prime wedge issue. Other wedge issues I'll probably want to talk about include critical race theory, issues around COVID and COVID denialism and COVID mandates are, that's obviously a wedge issue globally. Well, I don't know globally, but definitely in the United States and of course Canada. But I want to just set out a few things that I think are important for me anyway, in looking at politics and political news today. And one of the things that seems to be very sorely lacking is discernment, and the ability to not get pulled into like a knee-jerk reaction when you read something and not run away with, oh, well, this thing's happened. Because every single media outlet has an agenda. There's not a single media outlet that is just objectively reporting the news. And as a consumer of content, and content available to us like sitting on the toilet, like in ways that were not comprehensible people in other generations, we were able to like dip into conversations. And this lack of discernment, because people think, they forget that there's agendas and there's bias, and And maybe I'm not an expert on anything. And one of the things that I find very freeing, which I've gotten better at it over time, is understanding that you don't have to be an expert in everything, and you don't have to know everything, and you don't actually have to have an opinion on everything. So, for example, one of the things that I don't really have an opinion on is transgender participation in women's sports, because honestly, I don't know enough about it. And I also have views about public education in the United States and how public education is dealt with. And it's just not an issue I have strong feelings about. Because again, like, I am not an expert on Title IX, I'm not an expert on any of that stuff. So, but that's a wedge issue. Like, that is most certainly a wedge issue where you have two diametrically opposed camps that are really, there's a lot of demonization that goes back and forth. So, it's just like circling the drain conversation. And so, like, if you're actually intending to make progress, like, it's not going to get you there. That being said, there's a number of women who are active on the transgender participation in women's sports. I think have very excellent arguments, and I think you should check them out. But I am not that person, so just putting that out there. But there are other things that I feel more comfortable talking about based on my background and my own activist history. One of the things that has come up recently is Florida's "Don't Say Gay" bill, which I think is important to actually look at the bill. I'm going to read. This is from Human Rights Watch, which is I think it's a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. I could be wrong about that, so you should check. But they most certainly have an agenda, which I would say is like a liberal left agenda, which may or may not align with what your views are. Their description is the "Don't Say Gay" bill would ban discussing these issues. I'm not sure what these issues refers to, so maybe I didn't print something out, but I'm guessing sexual orientation and gender identity, and restrict how they are discussed in other grades if they are deemed not age appropriate. The bill does not specify what's considered age appropriate and who decides. Any parent can sue for compensation for alleged harm if they believe those discussions have occurred. The likely outcome of the bill, which has not yet passed, so hasn't passed, probably will pass. DeSantis said he would sign it. It would deter teachers from addressing sexual orientation or gender identity, and would chill open discussions and support for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students. The bill would also require school personnel to notify parents of changes in a student's physical, mental, and emotional health. It would limit the ability of counselors and teachers to be a confidential resource for students. So there are a number of competing concerns. Issues of children's rights, you have issues of parental rights, issues of diversity, you have issues of what is the role of public education and who should inform it. Public education is a hugely political institution where the teachers union in the United States has its very own agenda that is for teachers, not for children. And then you also have, some parents' rights organizations that are very much opposed to teachers unions, and they probably aren't super children either, because they view children as property, which they are most emphatically not property. So all of these things are going along, but headlines that I've seen for this have been very hyperbolic on both sides. So it's like, you won't be able to talk about gay people ever, like this bill protects parents from like the ungodly, like whatever, erosion of the family by like not acknowledging gay people, something like that. So it's like, there's a lot to go there. DeSantis wants to run for president. So he will support this bill because he is catering to a base. The base of people he's catering to are like the Trumpies and disaffected liberals who are like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So just stop for a second. Like, what does the bill do? Does it do these things that are being alleged? And in fact, it does. And I'll post a link to the bill. I encourage you to read it. It's not for me to tell you what it's like. I'm not going to read it, but you should read it. I will state government to itself into what should be taught at the local level, because in the United States, in most states, local municipalities have a lot of control over to what is taught in the school. There's of course state standards that standardized testing, but it's local control. So thinking about what should be taught in schools and mandating what should and should not be taught, is that really where we want to go? Like, is that really the solution to the problem you're trying to solve? Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve here? I don't know. Well, I do know. The problem they're trying to solve is they're trying to marginalize people who are gay and transgender. And, I don't know. Is it a good idea? Is it a response to what is perceived as overreach by gay and transgender activists who have injected all sorts of what I would consider silly nonsense into the educational curriculum? Remember the gender unicorn, the genderbread person, a lot of nonsense. So you have a push-pull with this issue, most certainly a wedge issue. Is this the solution? I don't think so. But this is where we are in the year 2022. So I will post a link in the comments. Check it out. I would, as a feminist, I would consider maybe this is not something you would want to get behind. But there's not a lot of feminism in the feminist movement these days, I think, because I don't think we have a set ideas of like what is a feminist movement. I can talk about what I think a feminist movement is, but I don't think most people would agree with it. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about, because this is obviously something that's been very, very effective as a fundraising tool, both on the right and the left, is critical race theory. This is obviously not a video where I'm going to talk about what critical race theory is, because that would be wholly inappropriate, because I am just a layperson and I'm not an expert on it. But one of the things I would encourage people to consider when they see these headlines that talk about critical race theory is to dive underneath and see what are they talking about when they're saying critical race theory. Because it's actually pretty unlikely in the United States that they're having college level discussions about critical race theory in any public K through 12 school. It's just not likely. Anecdotally, as a person who went through this many years ago, obviously, didn't happen then. As a parent who also has children and has friends who have children who participate in public education, it's not really a thing that is taught. Excuse me, I'm getting a phone call. All right. So ask what they mean. Like, what does it mean? And so usually what it means when they talk about critical race theory is someone is signaling, depending on who their constituency is, how they feel about the participation of Black people in culture. And in my opinion, a lot of this discussion is rooted in white discomfort with Black participation in culture. It's not really rooted in anything more than that. And so most elected officials, I believe this is probably true, but you should check me, in this country are still it's still mostly white people who are elected officials. And, white people about race. Take that defensiveness in different directions. And one of the ways you might take that defensiveness is to blame the messenger. That's saying, Emma Robertson has a good comment about left woke bashing, which is a great thing. I'll talk about that. It's not a great thing to do that. I mean, it's a great topic. But anyway, so I would encourage any feminist, particularly white women, when there's discussions about critical race theory, take a beat. Don't get pulled into an emotional response well, I'm not racist, because you probably are. And also, it's okay. People are human. So acknowledging we all have things that we might wish were different about ourselves, but we can get better. We can do better. And so think about like, what does it mean to do better? What does it mean to not, to not replicate racism? Because I mean, I don't know anyone who is a feminist who thinks racism is good. I hope we can all agree on that as a fundamental like truth about what a feminist movement should look like. But with the what's that lady, the adult human female lady? I don't remember her name. Like, she might disagree with me, but I also don't think she's a feminist. But as feminists, racism is bad. Can we agree on that? Okay, so anyway, critical race theory. Just Google critical race theory. You'll come up with lots of stuff. Here's an opinion piece from MSNBC, which is a cable news network in the United States that is most certainly like a left liberal agenda. I don't watch MSNBC because I find their coverage insufferable. But here's an op-ed about GOP bills banning critical race theory are racist, and Democrats should say so. Post also, it says here that banning critical race theory has occurred by Republicans in 14 states, being Black in America. That's disturbing. Like, I think it's okay to learn like history and to like think about how we teach history to incorporate other people in the United States. So like, these are things that are not, we shouldn't be afraid of this information. We should be, like, this is helpful new information. But the critical race bans are, they're not pro education or pro information. Like the Don't Say Gay bill, they're trying to like, let's deal with this problem of, I don't know, how do they frame it? What is the problem they're trying to solve? In my view, what they're trying to do is to, again, marginalize Black people, to make them feel lesser and not fully equal and not full participants in society. Because why are you doing these things? Again, at the state level, schools in the United States are generally like local control. Perhaps this is something that should be left at the local level. Perhaps this is something that doesn't need to be done at the state level. Is it really that pressing that people are learning things that they didn't know before? Anyway, but again, it makes white people feel bad to learn that white people are racist, I guess. Like, did you not know that? Because if you didn't know that, then public education really did kill you. All right, so there's a lot of content on critical race theory. Most recently, Idaho, the great state of Idaho, they passed a resolution that said history should be taught clearly and wholly, and says, oh, I guess they didn't pass it yet. It's pending still. And they specifically call out the 1619 Project, which I have not yet read. I recently bought it, and I'm planning on reading it. I haven't read it. There's a description of critical race theory in here, according to the American Bar Association. Position of second-class citizenship of this nation. One of the things that I think I would love to see is for the ability for people to listen, to take a beat and just listen to what someone is saying without immediately responding. And there's lots of like learning how to be a more effective communicator, classes that teach these skills, that it would be so great if people considered maybe like looking at things from another person's point of view, and excuse me, not taking the time when someone is speaking as an opportunity to just prepare for what you're going to say next, but to instead really listen to what people are saying. It's okay to let people have their point of view. It's okay for people to have a different perspective from you. Like, you're still okay. Like, you can tap your feet on the ground. You're still there. Okay? You're gonna be all right. Someone commented, what is the feminist movement is another wedge issue. That is really true. That is absolutely true. And that's a whole other conversation. So maybe we'll do another one of these. That's great. Okay, this is another article on transgender athlete bans, and this is from the Washington Post. It was on February 18th. It has a lot of listing of states that have done these things. And again, I'm not qualified to talk about those things, but like you have a wedge issue and then you do have some substance. That's the other thing, I guess, is like, what's the substance? What's the problem you're trying to solve? The transgender participation in women's sports, like it's pretty obvious what is the problem they're trying to solve. They're trying to make things fair for students. Okay, this is an article I found when I just Googled transgender and found like research. And I actually thought this was pretty interesting. This comes out of New Jersey. And this issue specifically is maybe not a wedge issue, but it's the larger issue of everything dealing with transgender people, because transgender people come up all the time on sides of the aisle as like, either the most evil demographic that are tearing down the country versus, the most oppressed and they need our protection. And I think both of those things are not true. Okay. Anyway, so in New Jersey, a transgender man sought to have his name change sealed, and he lost at the trial court level, and then the appeals court sided with him and said transgender people deserve privacy and protection from the harms that could arise from publicizing their name changes. This is interesting. The conclusion was that the person's name change has no meaningful public interest. It is difficult to imagine a more intimate, personal, and private matter than whether a person's gender identity conforms with the sex they were assigned at birth, typically based upon the existence and appearance of their reproductive organs and their chromosomal makeup. I think that's probably true. In most instances, it probably doesn't matter whether someone is gay or transgender. Like it only matters when there's a conflict of rights. So that leads me to the thing I wanted to talk about with transgender that I've seen over the last couple of years, which is this like just psychotic emphasis on pronouns, like completely psychotic emphasis on pronouns. And what I mean by that is there is this gender critical movement that has just grown out of, and it's not really out of feminism, as I think, I don't know if people know this, but gender critical as like a term was coined by a heterosexual woman who was not comfortable around gay people, in my opinion, and she was trying to like distance herself from like those mean lesbian radical feminists. And I'm not gonna name drop who that person is because they know who they are. Because if you divorce feminism, like if you divorce like a feminist analysis from this discussion, then you have gender critical, which is open to anybody. Like anybody can be like, I'm gender critical. And so you might have some women in that bucket who are feminists, and then you probably have some women in that bucket who are QAnon and who thought Trump was great and aren't feminists, including the adult human female lady who's she has a name that's similar to an actress that I like. And I can't remember which is which, like, because I get them confused all the time. So I don't want to say it, but y'all know who I'm talking about. She's not a feminist. And so she's like making bank on her t-shirts and all that shit. She's like the queen of the wedge issue. And like, great, that's your thing. It's like, this is your thing. Good for you. So, psychotic emphasis on pronouns. I honestly, I don't actually see, and I haven't actually seen that the use of pronouns one way or the other does anything except generate static and friction interpersonally among people. So, if I'm in a situation and someone's introduced to me as like, this is, Chad, he's blah blah blah, like, and then Chad walks away and someone's like, where did Chad go? I'm going to say he went over there. I don't actually care if Chad is female. Like, I don't care. I don't understand. Posey Parker, thank you. I didn't want to say the other name because I like that actress a lot, especially her performance on Parks and Recreation. So anyway, like pronouns aren't really an issue. Like they aren't really an issue in reality. Um, they, and like if you are living in a society, like you need ways to communicate with people and to understand people, and you can call someone by whatever pronoun they say without in your brain being like that's actually a male. Like you can understand like that's a female person who identifies whatever that means as a man. Like that's your business. It's okay. Now, pronouns might become an issue. We have compelled speech policies, which I think that's important to talk about, and that might be in some instances, depending on where it is, like that's something that you would push against. But just I'm in a Facebook group and I'm talking about somebody and I use their pronouns, I'm corrected. Like that's actually a man. Okay. Yes. I know. It's okay. So very rigid views, very rigid adherence to what you think is like this is the right way to do transgender activism. This is the right way to do gender critical, whatever that is. You should maybe consider that someone who is dictating to you how you should talk about an issue and how you should interpret the world, maybe that isn't someone that you need to trust. Like use your own powers of discernment to see like how am I going to understand the world and talk about these issues. Just a thought. It's okay. And you can not agree with me, and that's fine. I'm still here living my life. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about before I look at the comments on this video is the crack pipes and needles illicit drug use bill. And I don't know if this made news outside the United States, but back in December, there was, I think, it might have been National Institute, like National something administration that deals with substance abuse issues. They put out, they said, hey, we have like $30 million. We're going to give it away to programs that do harm reduction to combat drug addiction and drug use in communities. And again, I'm not an expert on harm reduction. Like I am just a lawyer, and I don't know about harm reduction. So I would maybe defer to medical professionals about like what works for harm reduction. And one of the things that apparently is helpful in harm reduction in communities is to give people like, kits to clean needles or kits to clean pipes because it prevents the spread of communicable diseases, which from a public health perspective probably makes sense. Now, does that mean like you think drug use is good and you want to encourage drug use? I don't think so, but apparently Republicans do, and also every single outlet that reported this does, because they led with federal government is buying crack pipes for drug addicts, which is not honest reporting. And I admit, I read that headline. I was like, what is this? That's nuts. It's like, are you kidding me? And then I read it. I was like, oh, actually, it's not as sexy as the headline. But wedge issues don't need to be rooted in reality, because that's not what the point is of the wedge issue. The point of the wedge issue is to be divisive, to reach out and grab you, and to like separate good people from the bad people, the us's from the thems. And that's all that it's about, is that process. And then the power of building power based on the divisions of the us's and the thems. So that's what it is. So we now have a colossal waste of effort in the United States Senate. Here it is. This is a press release. Rubio Manchin introduced bipartisan bill to prohibit federal purchasing of crack pipes and needles for illicit drug use. The name of this bill is the Preventing Illicit Paraphernalia for Exchange System Act. That is an acronym for PIPES. So it's prohibiting federal funding from being used to purchase drug paraphernalia such as crack pipes or needles for illicit drugs that can exacerbate substance use disorder. Now, Joe Manchin is not a public health expert, and neither is Marco Rubio, but they're both politicians. So it makes perfect sense that they would join on this bill that isn't going to pass, because they're just trying to like make it be an issue in an election or the election campaign. And that's garbage and a waste of time. And that's the thing about wedge issues, is they are often, frequently, a waste of time. And like, the more that you give energy to it, the more you get sucked into it, and you're like, it becomes reality for you. It becomes more important than it might actually be. Because let's take a step back and talk about like these bills that prohibit, or like you can't talk about transgender issues or gay issues in schools. Like, how much of a problem is this actually? It's a real question. Like, how much of a problem is it? I can tell you that as a parent, when there have been things that have come up in school that I'm like, hey, I have concerns about it. Like, I have just talked to just people at the school. And like, you might not always get the result that you like, but that process of communication, maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't need actually a state law that says you can't teach a thing. Maybe that's just me, but that seems like an overreach. All right, so let's see. Left woke bashing. Yeah, that's a really good point. I hear someone using the term woke in a derisive fashion. You are signaling to me, at least, that you are racist. Like, the term woke is rooted in African American vernacular. Like, it's not rooted in anything other than that. And so perhaps this is an example of, you don't have to know everything and you don't always have to say a thing. Perhaps that might be a moment that you just don't say a thing, because it's much like, gay people using the word queer, which queer is not a slur. I know this is upsetting, but it's really, at this point, not a slur. Of course, anything can become a slur if it's used as a slur, including gay. Queer in and of itself is not a slur in 2022. You may personally not like it, but other people in my community, I do consider myself to be part of the gay community, even when it calls itself the queer community, because of my own experience. Like, it's not a slur. But woke is not a word for white people. And when you use it as they're woke, like, you sound like a moron. You just sound like a moron. And I might consider, there's nothing feminist about using like that kind of loaded language that has also been used by people who are most certainly not feminists, like Tucker Carlson. Although I do know that there are some feminists that go on Tucker Carlson and think that's great because no one else is giving them a platform. What's wrong with going on Tucker Carlson? I mean, okay. Like, another example of, like, you could have said nothing, and that would have been a more feminist act, to not say anything. So really consider that when you're in these conversations and people are talking about the woke left, that term, that languaging is not rooted in things that are feminist at all. Yeah, I don't know why feminists understand male privilege, but they don't understand white privilege. Like saying that male privilege exists is not saying that all men are bad, and it's not even saying that individual men are privileged over individual women. It's saying, like, systemically, here's how we understand how society was built, and especially in the United States, white privilege most certainly exists. Like, look around you, open your eyes. Like, the fact that you're comfortable because someone is teaching a thing from a perspective that you weren't taught is, if nothing else, is like taking a beat. and not every social media you can read a book, which I really encourage reading of books. And I've been reading a lot of books over the last couple of years since I've decided not to really participate in these conversations. Okay, so I don't have answers to how we kind of together, get to a better place of discernment. Certainly social media tools are not designed for discernment. They're designed for instant gratification and ready, like, arguments and fightiness and all this stuff. And I am most certainly aware that a lot of the the bloggers that were blogging like around 2010, 2011, like I think that most of them have stopped because of burnout and because of like, what's the point? And now it seems to me you have much louder voices of people who are not feminists that are now like they're just fully hooked into this like wedge issue shit, and that's all they want to talk about. Okay. Yeah, going on Tucker Carlson is a wedge issue. That's one of the comments. Yeah, I mean, like Tucker Carlson is just like his whole shtick is wedge issues. Like you can watch him on any given night, and like whoever he's whipping that day is like, yeah, that's who we're supposed to hate that day. I don't know why anyone with two brain cells to rub together has any time or energy to participating in that in any way whatsoever. And I could say that about other shows too, but Tucker Carlson is the one I'm like, that really, like, you could just have stayed home and taken a bath. Like that would have been more productive. But Kara Dansky, I think she's not with I think wasn't she with Wolf? And I don't think she's with Wolf anymore, but I might be confusing her with someone else. I get them kind of confused. But like I think she has like, this is her brand now, this is her job, this is what she's trying to sell. Is this constant outrage, and it's not sustainable. Like from a human perspective, like it's not sustainable to just always be in like reactive mode. At some point, you're going to have to be like, okay, how are we building community, recognizing that there are people in community that have different views than us? And I can ask that question to trans activists who are like, Kelly Brennan is a mean, evil TERF. I'm like, you can say that as much as you want, and it's not true. It's not true. You don't like my opinions. That's okay. Like, you don't have to, because I don't like your opinions either. But at some point, if we're all living in community and we're all living in a democracy, we all should be able to participate in conversations. Like, you're gonna have to deal with the fact that people don't agree with you. One of the things, yeah, and a lot of gender critical ideas are not very critical of gender. That's very true. Very true. And in fact, the woman who coined it, I don't think was very critical of gender herself. There was one thing else I wanted to say, and it has now slipped out of my mind. Technology. So technology is also not geared towards like actual conversation, because there's nothing in the technology and social media that we have that encourages like waiting, pausing, thinking, listening, or discernment. Like it's all like immediate, like, I gotta tweet this out, I gotta say this, I gotta say this. Again, you don't always have to respond to things. You can actually not respond to things, and sometimes there's better ways to respond to something than to like immediately responding with like, you're a horrible person. And the reporter who I asked to correct the thing, like that person just should have like not responded to me. They should have just been like, okay, let me look into this, and like not responded until they were ready to respond, instead of accusing me of being well, this statement I made was like 4 years ago, so why do you care? Or, well, you're just an old decaying corpse, so why should I care? Like, you could have just said nothing and waited, but you left discernment. Okay, so Kara Dansky was with Wolf, and now she's with the Women's Human Rights Declaration. Thank you for that. So, okay, I think that's all I'm going to talk about today. If you have things you'd like to talk about, please like send me a note or drop it as a comment, and we can talk about it. There's a whole like conversation we had about COVID and the last 2 years of dealing with COVID, which is such a drag. Like, but that's its own conversation. Oh, here's an example of gender critical analysis. A gender critical man told someone that men are naturally logical and born with sense of fairness, but that women lost their true identities in the 70s. Okay, thanks, guy. That's an example where you might just say, thanks, guy. I'll think about that. Bless your heart, is what they say in the South. Irish people when we're not being fighty, we might just say, "Is that so?" We get a lot of that. So yeah, there's a lot on. Thank you for the 4 people who tuned in for this, and I'll see you. Bye.